So, begin by congratulating Amog for this fine work. It's in terms of, I think, very laboriously done. Lot of detailing. Amog has built the background history of the first pollster. A lot of anecdotes in the book. I think he had a lot of conversations with individual pollsters. He names some of them. The first one for BJP, the first one for Congress. So these are all very important, and as he rightly says, that this is a very understudied area within Indian politics. But let me bring back, because Roshan has already commented on some of the nitty-gritty functional aspects of party working, the interface between pollsters and political party officials, so on and so forth. What are the big conceptual issues in a study of this kind? What could be the possible reason? And that's where it's a bit intriguing, Amok, that you do touch upon many of them in your introduction, but you don't carry them forward. So that would be my big lament in the book, that why did you miss that big opportunity of actually throwing up many intriguing insights, because you had that advantage of having a fresh entry into the study of Indian politics. So I will run through actually the way some of them come in your book, and then try to extrapolate what more you could have possibly said and why did you not do that. One obviously is the limitation burden of writing a PhD. We are rarely allowed to say anything interesting in writing PhDs. We have all gone through that process. So I could clearly point out that could be one reason. But you should tell us if there is something more to this story as to why the book is caught in a lot of detailing. But the cream, the fleshing out the conceptual issues, while you touch upon almost all of the right issues that I would have had in my mind, but you kind of give a very ad hoc, quick, fixes, kind of formulations. One, I think the interesting part is that the rise of professionalism, this phenomenon of professionalization runs tandem with rise of populism. And if you observe both these phenomenon, they actually counter each other. The professionalization is all about technocrat liberalism, it's about technology, it is about centralization, it is about data, it is about secrecy, it is about very technical details of data, graphs. Populism is anything but opposite of that. It's all about gut feeling, it's about common sense, it is about popular mobilization, it's about popular symbolism, it's about popular appeal. So there must be something in this. I thought that conceptually that could have been the key tugging point for your book of this kind, is that why does professionalism arise in India, as you pointed out, 2009, which is roughly the phase when you had the second, 2014 is where one would call the populist turn in Indian democracy. That then can one read professionalization as offsetting all that populism does, in terms of its political reach, in terms of its political mobilization, especially, pointing to your rise of professionalism, you point to three factors: innovation. But I thought the second factor was by far the most important factor in Indian politics, that there has been a large-scale social fragmentation and social fluidity that got into Indian politics post-2014. With subclassification, any number of issues one can think about, internal divisions within religious minorities, within OBCs, middle class is now heterogeneous. So I think there is complete fluidity, that social base. We initially point to that. I thought that could have been a very interesting pegging point to understand, does professionalization actually come as a counter antidote to this fluidity? What it does, it maps through data, how this fluidity is flowing, because there is no political party. You also point that there are no safe seats anymore. That political social base of political parties and individuals is today very fluid. Dalits, it doesn't mean that Dalits will only vote for BSP, doesn't mean that Muslims will only vote for AM, so on and so forth. That there is a massive fluidity. So I think the key conceptual question for me, because you also raised is that you're interested in this larger question of the implications of professionalization for the normative and political future of democracy in India. And that's where I think one could link that, what does this professionalization do to this potential democratization that is there within Indian democracy through social fragmentation? Does it offset this populist mobilization? Does it enhance? So on and so forth. I think that's one key question. Maybe you would want to return at some point, in your work. Second, you also raise this very tangentially, is the interface between growing authoritarianism and professionalization. Of course, you conclude very quickly saying that you don't see any direct link between the two, but I think there is still something there for us to study in terms of why growing professionalization is also in its technological mode, in its technological design, makes election more personality-centric. I think there is something for us to study there. I think the reach of the technology, whether social media, the intimacy of this technology, I think is doing something to this. Not only is it converting Indian politics into more personality, cult-based kind of mobilization, and this is happening globally, not just India. Look at United States and look at UK and look at Turkey. But there's something more happening there. It's not merely rise of authoritarianism or a charismatic leader in the Weberian sense. For Weber, the heroic was at a distance. That's the imagination of Weber in terms of who is a charismatic leader. But look at the populist strongmen. I refer to them, Amog, in my own writings as the intimate strongmen. What is very different about the current populist strongmen is that they are both larger than life, but they're also in the registers of intimacy. Every day, pariksha pe charcha, chai pe charcha. Mr. Yogi Adityanath comments on your health, how to take care of your personal health. Yoga is another mode in which they are entering into our personal, everyday, details, biopolitical details or well-being. So I think there is both this combination of intimacy and the larger than life. Adorno refers to this as a combination of the King Kong and the suburban barber. That a strong man has both these features. He's common, like everybody else, vulnerable, but is also larger than life and infallible. I think technology is doing something here in terms of bringing this kind of a centralization of personality cult. If you want to tweak this, the specificity of what technology is doing to Indian democracy is that it's not merely a question of professionalization, authoritarianism, but this nature and social character of the leadership, that to bring in this kind of an intimacy and also larger than life centralization of power, which are deeply anti-democratic in institutional terms. Third aspect was in terms of your digital campaigns, that you do say that it's not a modernization phenomena, they are all overlapping. But to just push you hard on that, I think a lot of digital campaigns in India, while they have massive reach, in my own field visits to Haryana and Rajasthan, I found that what really clinches is the door-to-door campaign. I think digital campaigns, I think there is again a dialectic operating here. The opaqueness, the indifference, the nondescript nature of the digital campaign is heavily backed by personalized campaign. For BJP, it is done by RSS. For Congress, it is done by nobody. That is the problem. So why Congress partly does bad. In Haryana, when I went and met a lot of pollsters, this is what they told me. That the advantage BJP really has is that RSS works 365 days and they make it a point to touch every household within that 1 year or 2 year period. Their campaign actually begins 2 years before elections, and they go door to door. They have individual contact. Each RSS pracharak has n number of list of people who they are supposed to tap again and again. Again, when you watch Delhi elections closely, it was the drawing room, about the thousands of drawing rooms, small RWA meetings that RSS had in almost every colony. That continuous. So this kind of a personalized campaign, face-to-face conversations, we often miss them when we talk about digital. The technology, apparently, I think that's where the populists have an edge, because populists also work through social psychological categories, that even as they push an overreach of digital campaigning, I think they're heavily backed by face-to-face. And I think there is a dialectic operating there, that this opaqueness of the technology is backed heavily by personal face-to-face, and I think that gets enhanced. Somehow those personalized, their nature gets enhanced. And to give you a quick interesting anecdote, that RSS now has started what is called an apartment pracharak in Mumbai. Very, it's an interesting term to have an apartment pracharak is called, that is supposed to go to every apartment, because obviously most mega cities, most of us are migrants, we don't have our families here, we don't have friends. So, I mean, there are also a lot of people living by themselves, individual. So, RSS brings them together every Sunday, creates a community. So if you just give you this, will give you a sense of what I'm saying, that those technological campaigns, I think, are heavily backed by this, under the radar campaigns, which are not visible, which I think RSS does very, very silently. So what does this interface would actually mean? That if you want to get the exact reach and the significance of technological campaigns, you'll have to also study this door-to-door campaigns and personalized campaign style. Fourth is you make the very interesting point on marketization of politics. That you also touch upon neoliberalism. I'm glad that at least there's reference to neoliberalism after a long time in a book on political science. It often is missed by most political scientists. But you do refer to and say that neoliberalism does play a role in terms of bringing in technologies. Even here, I mean, this is a very complex point, but I don't want to drag this too much. But I think there is something in terms of certain culturalization of politics and marketization of politics. What you say, that BJP does not compromise ideologically even when they are heavy on technology. I think there is something deeper happening. That this culturalization of politics, spiritualization with marketization, perhaps that uncanny equivalence is possible with the way technology, digital images are created. If you saw the digital images of Ayodhya temple that were thrown around at the time of run-up to Ayodhya, there was a temple in the foreground, in the background you had this flyovers and high-rise buildings. Those digital images have very powerful symbolism of combining certain marketization of spirituality. That that spiritual is not different from modernization, modernity, market and economic opportunities. In fact, temple itself then becomes, you were referring to Ravinder's work, that I think temple then itself becomes a symbol of modern development. And I'm very fond of saying this, that Nehru said that dams are the modern temples. Under Mr. Modi, temples are the modern dams. That has converted spiritual campaign, has converted pilgrimage, your Vishwanath corridor, all modern development is linked to temple. So religious and religiosity is itself now a modern phenomenon. Is a highly technologically driven phenomenon. And therefore that is possible, I think, that marketization and really why BJP can achieve what it does, that why it looks like it does not compromise on its ideologies. I think that's where technology plays a heavy. Then the fifth is your supply side and the demand side. That on the supply side, on the demand side, of course, you say, we have already touched upon, I think, this new fluidity of social breaking down of the social groups, I think is a massive reason why pollsters and people like Prashant Kishore play a lot of role in terms of local constituency data, looking at which group would vote which side and so on and so forth. But the more interesting is the supply side, that you do touch upon this, that it is linked to the rise of new middle classes. Leela Fernandez's work takes care of that new category of rise of new middle classes, and you do make some reference to caste configuration of this. But what I liked really was your definition of the middle class, which I completely go by. That it is a cultural identity governed by a shade, a moral code, attitude and orientation in public life. Now this is where I think you could have really pushed this argument further, that why would new middle classes, highly educated professionals, technocrats would want to do this kind of a political stroke organizational work. This is not completely political. They prefer to remain in the background. But there is a certain cultural imagination in what they're doing. It is like the old Brahmin controlling, the Raja. I don't see it any different. That most, I'm sure if you break down the caste configuration of this professional, most of them will be Brahmin or there is, I think there is no two ways about this. And there is definitely a strong caste embedded imagination in why these guys are getting attracted to this larger of pulling the levers from behind. That is a basic character of Brahminical, enjoying power without responsibility. So you pull the levers, you want to decide policies, you want to decide the campaign style, and you feel that these days, wherever you meet people, all of them feel they are important in campaign. They think that they are actually driving the campaign. They said, "Maine ye bata diya, wo ho gaya, maine ye input de diya," and I keep bumping into these pollsters in media, dinners, and all of them feel extremely important. They feel, I have given this campaign, I have given that slogan. This newfound, renewed importance of a middle class that has got itself privatized in the last 30 years. I think this is an offset to that privatized mode. In that privatized mode, you might have comforts, you might have a good life, but you don't have a public life. The most crisis of the middle class is that you want to play that larger public role without the responsibilities that come with, and this is an ideal role. This is an ideal role fit for this kind of a cultural milieu where you have the sense of gaining power, but you have no responsibility. You are pulling the levers from behind. You are in touch with all important political leaders. I met a pollster at a dinner. Then he was telling me that I just met our Congress leader, Jairam Ramesh. He said, I just had one-to-one meeting with Jairam Ramesh. Next week I'm meeting Rahul Gandhi. I don't know how much of those are made up stories, but there's a certain sense of inflated importance to these technocrats who are otherwise politically relevant, who are otherwise, I don't think, have a deep sense. And most of their rhetorical legitimacy comes from their default libertarians. They're all neoliberals in their outlook. They're all for massive private growth. They're all for global capital, big cities, without saying it goes. But I think if you could have explored a little more on that side, that why this middle class with their cultural attitude, that would have given you, because you also miss this creation of slogans, that substantive part. I think your book gets caught more and more in the institutional details. How do these campaigns go? How are those campaigns and slogans made? Who actually makes them? And what is their cultural imagination? What is their socio-economic background? I think that would have made your book even more fascinating. Because otherwise, you're more into this institutional organization, while that is important as it stands. But I think the real flesh was this, that who are these pollsters, how do they come about, and how do they actually plan campaigns? How do they actually know the slogans? Where does that imagination come from? Does technological data give them? And I'm sure that in those places, it's their own cultural, social backgrounds that matter, and how they walk into, under the technocratic garb, I think they push in a cultural, social agenda. So I think technology at one level is also a certain cover-up to a social process that has become increasingly regressive, that as we see with the current political regime. So technology, I think, is also playing that role. That a lot of cultural prejudices, socio-cultural attitudes, I think, are slipped into the political campaigns as technocratic artifacts, while they are not. And technology gives us that sense. Then is your point on populism. You raise this very important point again. This populism, this entire new mode is about performance, the importance of performance and communication phenomena. That you make this distinction between form and design campaign matter, and we have now come to realize that performance is an irreducible aspect of all electoral campaigns. Right? Performance is not an aberration of democracy, but performance is heart of democracy. That you cannot have mass democracies without rhetoric and performance. Rhetoric and performance is not merely manipulation, is not merely creation. It's actually a mode of communication. Rhetoric, as Aristotle also says, rhetoric is a mode of political communication. Right? In mass democracies, in meaning-making exercise, since you're not sitting face-to-face with everyone, you're communicating to a large mass who you will never meet in your life. And how do you make that meaning when you do not have personal interaction? I think that's where performance, and that's where all these things become very important. But that's where my question really would be that how do you see this centrality of performance and rhetoric? Do we visualize it as a process of democratization? That the fact that now parties are so dependent on this theatrics, that is it necessarily a symptom of increasing fluidity? Lot of plural social fragmented groups are now beginning to matter. So I think it's a process of drawing an equivalence. So I think there is an acknowledgement in performance of diversity, diverse social groups, diverse social opinions, and performance is like the old Laclovian idea of drawing an equivalence between very fragmented imaginations. So I think performance, therefore, I think is a very important symptom of democratization. But of course, we also know that performance can be synthetic. Performance can be artificially generated. That even your emotions can be tapped today, like the way markets do today. That your emotions, your needs are also generated. So I think there is also this inorganic process of tapping into them externally. It's a very strange process of where voters are treated like consumers. Your voting preferences have become like consumer demands. It's almost like a goods. You have a relation as if you are buying a good in a company, and therefore this pollsters play an important role of this conversion of the voters into consumers. So I see both these parallel back and forth processes jostling together. The performance at one level is acknowledging deep democratization, but performance is also about this immense ability that technology has brought to control by doing these big mood surveys and having a tab. Look at the Maharashtra elections. The moment they found that they're not doing well, they got the elections postponed by a couple of months. Then they had the direct cash transfers, and then you can see the results. So you can also have a very manufactured, synthetic process to that moment of democratization. So that's, I think, makes it's very interesting in terms of how do we study performance? How do we study this new rhetoric of political communication? I thought that your book could have pushed harder on that aspect. And finally, I thought that a counterfactual, a counterintuitive example could have made the book a little more spicier. Why do digital campaigns fail? It's not always that digital campaigns have a reach. Digital campaigns fall flat many occasions. Look at the India Shining campaign. It fell flat, right? Look at Mr. Chandrababu Naidu. This was not the first time that you pointed to Rajiv Gandhi, but there was also at regional level. Chandrababu Naidu was one of the earliest chief ministers to have e-conferences. He was the one to have internet as the major mode of governance. He would have all these district collectors have meetings sitting in their districts, directly connect to the field. He was the first one to name himself as the CEO. He was the first one to bring this imagination of Singapore and Shanghai into Indian politics. Where is Chandrababu today? That soon after that Hyderabad building high rise, he lost elections. So this imagination, this digitalized imaginations, this hyper modernist imaginations, also people are suspicious of. I think there is a limitation to this because I think through the certain cultural, and again, I don't have the time to expand on this, but I think certain cultural and social milieu also push back these hyper digitalized campaigns. But there is also a sense of innate suspicion that Indian voter has towards this. But how do they both operate together, I think would be a fascinating question, and we would want to listen to you more on this. Thank you.